Okay, very cool. One aspect that I was thinking about is when people are on, one Wi-Fi service at a time, if there's too many, it'll slow down the service. Is that same aspect comparable to Helium, like the Helium network or ElongFi?
So no, it won't interrupt. I've done a couple of different things where I've monitored the actual volume of packets that these miners and what's actually in those packets through a tool called Wireshark, just to make sure that there's nothing malicious, there's not something no one knows about that the manufacturer's implanted in there, anything like that. Obviously, being in cyber, I have to kind of cross some of those off my list. And yeah, no, there's nothing that's going to degrade one's home network or anything like that. With 5G, I would anticipate that it's going to be different. Just looking at the power unit for this, it's not 5 watts. I don't have the specs with me at the moment, but it's definitely not 5 watts. It's definitely going to have a lot of other considerations because it's 5G, especially with indoor use. Whereas this doesn't. This signal is not that strong. It's not the type of thing that you're going to have. And then you have all this stigma around 5G and some of this negative misconceptions that exist out there, and different memes and videos talking about 5G, fries people's brains and stuff like that. So that's going to be a hurdle. It's going to have its own set of challenges, I think, different than this. Power usage, internet capacity that it's going to require, placement. That use case is to ultimately create a 5G network, but that's more limited to the United States, because the United States back in, I think it was January of 2020 or 2021, they passed a legislation that established CBRS, which is basically the equivalent of open source 5G. That's why you can have a company like this that, or else, as we may or may not know, the carriers, they go through the FCC, they buy spectrum, they buy licensing for that, and then that's how they build out the networks. One of the reasons they're sunsetting these legacy networks is to actually free that up for them to redeploy future networks. But in this case, that's not needed. There is no, billion-dollar auctions that only mega corporations can be involved in. This is where anyone and everyone can do it. So these guys that developed Helium and saw that the use case was doing so well said, let's take it up a notch. Let's do this with 5G, because 5G is a huge disruptor. Because then you're going to, if you look at how quickly Helium has grown, Verizon and T-Mobile and AT&T, they don't even grow at that speed. Let's just take their 5G rollout. We've been hearing about 5G for a few years now, right? Even though it might say 5G on our phones, we're not really truly at 5G at the moment. It's more marketing right now than it is actual 5G across the board. So that's, and that's a few years, and that's these, massive organizations with a ton of different resources and, able to do a lot of things. But if you look at this network that went from almost nothing 2 years, like 2 years ago, you couldn't even have the coverage map this zoomed out. It just wouldn't even make sense. You wouldn't be able to see anything. To go from that to this, to where, pretty much all the major cities are covered now. New York is just all over the place. California, it's all over the place. So I think if the same speed is applied to 5G and rolling it out, which it will, because I've watched now the 2 times that this device was open for folks to reserve, it flew off the shelves, and that's with them selling 30,000 devices, and with it just at the moment being limited to the US, because this isn't unlike LoRaWAN, which does exist in other countries. And you can go to Europe, you can go to Asia, you can go to South America and set this up. That's not the case for CBRS. So right now, I just want to clarify that that's just from the United States right now. I'm sure there's like a ton of efforts right now to change that. And if this goes well and the use case proves itself, even more so, especially in developing countries. And, there's a lot of places in the world that telecom organizations don't see an ROI in extending their infrastructure to, where this is where folks can take control of that. So you get more coverage, you get it faster, and you get it cheaper. People are obviously being motivated to build out the network. And then ultimately, the cost of using the network is always going to be more competitive than what the carriers are going to charge them. So, it really puts them in an interesting place. I think initially, as far as like predictions and where I think it'll go, I think that we'll see 5G. It'll probably take a couple years to roll it out in the, throughout the United States. And I think initially, they have a huge partnership with Dish Network. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. That just happened. That was a huge catalyst for HNT itself. It soared afterwards. But Dish Network is involved now. They're looking at doing some things with the 5G network. There's some references on Twitter to other partnerships that are coming into play and other big carriers looking at it, because if you're one of these big carriers, what's smarter than trying to compete or trying to squash this is to partner with us. Because what's going to happen is you get to 5G faster, it's cheaper, and you just set up some sort of roaming agreement. And I think that's the hope, is that there'll ultimately be some sort of roaming partner. Who it's going to be and how that's all going to look, who knows? I know a lot of the way that they want this 5G network to roll out is really in congested spaces, places where, like, for example, like a stadium. You ever go to a stadium and try to make a phone call or send a video or something? They try their best. In a lot of instances, they have their own nodes all over the stadiums for the different carriers, but even that sometimes gets inundated with requests and just can't function. This is where if these networks were deployed in the right places, especially if you're able to partner with businesses that are strategically placed in these places, you can then offload some of that set of requests through that 5G network. So that takes off pressure off of Verizon and AT&T and T-Mobile and so forth. So, there may be a future where they partner with one another. There may be a future where this grows so quickly and advances so much that they don't want to do that, and they go head to head. And that'll be really interesting because it adds a whole other player that isn't in the same business model and is probably not going to be negotiating the same way that the carriers do amongst themselves.